Joe Biden has finally secured the nomination to become the Democratic standard bearer in this year's presidential elections in the United States. So basically, he has the full number of delegates count needed to represent the Democrats. Throughout the primaries, Mr. Biden faced little opposition from within the party, even as his opponents, Congressman Dean Phillips and writer Marianne Williamson, attempted to capitalize on the president's low approval ratings. So basically, these were the two challenges to the incumbent president. Well, it's not often that we have a challenger to an incumbent president, but Joe Biden did get these challenges, although their challenge to him was very, very minimal. In the GOP arena, however, Trump became the presumptive presidential candidate after winning enough delegates to get him over the line. So basically, Trump also has secured the adequate number of delegates needed to represent the Democratic Party in the upcoming American presidential elections. Trump's victory became imminent when his only remaining contender, Nikki Haley, and we know Nikki Haley because she stayed in the race for the longest time, even after other delegates had, stepped off from the race. Nikki Haley stayed for quite some time, all the way till about a week ago, when she withdrew. So she withdrew, I believe, last Tuesday after Super Tuesday, when she ended up winning, I think, just about one state, and Trump put up a very, very dominant performance. And we need to talk about this because it is one of the few times, or the first time in history, that somebody has won the nomination in such a manner that Trump did. He won most of the races from Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and on and on and on, putting up very dominant performances and stretching his closest rivals, 60% to 25%, 53 to 15, 65 to 30. The gap, huge gaps in the primary, therefore showing his dominance, even in the primaries, and his popularity in the party. So, what does this mean? These results mean that there is going to be a rematch between former President Donald Trump and President Joe Biden. It's a setup of a rematch, and that's very rare as well. It is actually the first time since 1956 that the two major parties are presenting the same candidates from the previous election. So it's a very interesting dynamic. America is at the crossroads. There are a number of things happening in the country at this point, a lot of issues to be discussed within the nation. And as you saw the graphic earlier on, the candidates, yes, so there you see it, for the Republican side, Trump is representing the GOP, or the Republican Party. And as you can see there, you need 1,215 delegates to secure the nomination, or to win the nomination. Trump crossed this line this week when he secured 1,247. And as you can see, his closest contender there, that's Nikki Haley, former governor of South Carolina, first female Indian American governor of South Carolina, putting up a very strong performance but being woefully inadequate. She had 93. And after that, we have Ron DeSantis, the governor of the Sunshine State of Florida, with a lot of nice beaches, but very, very, very controversial, laws and legislations that have recently been passed. That's why we have Disneyland. And Disneyland has been in a lot of confrontation with the governor over there because of the introduction of so many rules and laws and other things. So that's Governor Ron DeSantis for you, who dropped out very, very early in the race with just 9 candidates. And then after that was Vivek Ramaswamy, the Indian American mogul, billionaire, who also put out himself to challenge Donald Trump, but had to quickly revise his notes because he only managed 3 delegates. But although, he was seen to be a dark horse or a long shot candidate, hasn't been in politics, never had a political career, a business person, and so that performance was to some extent commendable as far as his freshman status in the political cycle is concerned. So when we go back to the illustration, we see that on the Democrat side, Joe Biden also won the nomination after very little, opposition from his contenders or from his challengers. So this is where the race stands at this point as far as the American presidential elections are concerned. So it brings us to an end officially. When we talk about the primaries, it brings the primary season to an end. It was a very interesting primary. The action was on the side of the Republicans, but Donald Trump has run away with the nomination, putting up very, very strong performances, thereby stamping his feet or his authority on the Republican Party, and now he's the official standard bearer. That means a whole lot. This week alone, he went to the party headquarters and did a very big shake-up, sacking some people, telling some staff to reapply, and shaking up the entire Republican National Committee, the RNC, all over again. So it's the Trump takeover of the Republican Party. On the Democrat side, they are in government, right? So we have Joe Biden as the president. So the Democratic Party has coalesced around him. But of course, we also do know that there are huge, huge concerns with the performance of the president. Top on the list is his reaction to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. There are issues as well with the economy, the rising levels of inflation, unemployment. A lot of young people are concerned about that. And so he does have something to contend. There's also an impeachment against Joe Biden. Yes, there's an impeachment that has been launched at the House of Representatives. Involving his son, Hunter Biden, on some corruption allegations. So there's quite a bit that Joe Biden needs to contend with himself. So this is really the state of the race, where things stand. And there'll be a lot of time to talk about these, the matchup, how it's going to look, how the two of them are going to really position themselves going up, later on in the year. For now, though, we also do want to look at some of the major issues. We've talked about the candidates quite a bit, but we also do want to talk about some of the major issues that are dominating the race. On top of the agenda, there are concerns about the state of democracy in the U.S. and the so-called democratic decline. There are concerns about race and gender. Race always a very big issue, voting rights, minority access, to certain essential services in the nation. Female participation in politics is also a very big one. And so these are some of the issues that are going to characterize or feature very, very strongly in the election. Unfortunately, I had the opportunity to be in the U.S. I had very, important conversations with some experts and with some scholars out there. I also spoke to some of the American youth to get a pulse of what was happening. So this was really on the ground. We've put together a couple of voices, a couple of these interviews or responses, and we'll be showcasing that to you subsequently. There was a very big conversation I had with Professor Matthew Baum. He is a top global scholar, one of the most well-cited people when it comes to global communications at Harvard University. Of course, a very top-notch leading global institution in his office. So I visited Professor Baum, and we had a conversation about a lot of issues happening in American politics. Top of the agenda, we're talking about fake news and misinformation. That's a very big issue over there as well. And with the upsurge of technology, the popularity of AI, countries like China and Russia using some of this technology, there are really big concerns about how AI is going to affect the misinformation and disinformation environment in the United States. So if that clip is ready, I mean, I think we can listen to Professor Baum on some of these issues. On some of these issues.
Democracy is under a lot of pressure. Yeah, so it's under strain for sure. Um, there's always been a divide, a sort of a fundamental divide between the folks that kind of bought into the federal democratic institutions of our democracy and folks who've been kind of resentful of them. But that divide was kind of suppressed for a long time. And increasingly over the last, say, 30 years or so, we've seen it become more and more salient. And Donald Trump, with his campaign that was fundamentally based on this kind of resentment, has kind of smashed those fissures wide open, where you have states that don't want the types of federal programs that the government is offering, increasingly trying to reject them and to sort of substitute their own policy preferences for those of the federal government. And these are creating. We haven't yet quite had a full-blown constitutional crisis, but we've had lots of scenarios that could potentially devolve into a constitutional crisis. For instance, the Texas governor giving state police the power to arrest immigrants, which is pretty clearly the purview of the federal government, or erecting razor wire to prevent.
So that was Professor Baum having a conversation with us on the nature of democracy in America. I mean, there's a challenge to a lot of democratic institutions. Yeah, there's a challenge to a lot of democratic institutions, and there are concerns that democracy needs to be safeguarded, especially in terms of access to voting opportunities over there. But there were some other issues as far as the status and the nature of politics in the country is concerned, which he talked to us about. Let's take a listen. But let me ask the hot button question. This is something a lot of people outside America want to understand. Why is it that Donald Trump is continuing to get a lot of traction despite the really, really degraded language he uses sometimes?
Well, there's scholars who've written already dozens and dozens of books on this topic, and there are different theories about it. But I think the primary one is that he's capturing an alienation and an anger within the population. And even though you would think, as someone who's reportedly wealthy, that he would not do well with those who oftentimes struggle financially, but he brings that anger out, and it gives them a space they feel like they are being listened to, and he speaks to their grievances. And when you speak to their grievances, and there's been a lot done on the Trump voter, and before they were Trump voters, they were identified as Tea Party members, and back decades. But many of the historically rooted voters for Trump come from communities who are more rural. They come from communities that were, their generations date back to the enslavement periods, and many have historically felt alienated, and that all the attention was placed on, richer people, and then when there's so much attention during the civil rights movement on uplifting African Americans and Black people and Latina people, that they felt left out. And it's like, where's our programs that are going to bolster us? And there have been anti-poverty programs that have been designed to help more impoverished people, but oftentimes there is more attention on the historically marginalized. Some white poor people in the United States have not had as much attention paid to them.
So that's just a glimpse of the nature of the issues that would be characterizing the race. But of course, it's going to be a very, very long race. And we hope to interrogate a lot more of these issues and the personalities that are at the center of it in subsequent episodes of this. Thank you very much for staying with us on America Decides today. We'll be with you next week once again.